There's a question that remains unanswered until the very end of Breaking Bad, but the show finally resolves its long-running mystery in an undeniable way. The ending of 2013's Felina is a seminal point in the Breaking Bad timeline. The Season 5 finale is the last installment of the show that began the franchise, and showrunner Vince Gilligan really made it count. Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul were co-leaders of the Breaking Bad cast as Walt White and Jesse Pinkman, respectively. Their fascinating dynamic went through several changes throughout every season of Breaking Bad, but the writers made sure to keep the most central element of their partnership under wraps for as long as possible. Thankfully, Felina resolved the Walt-Jesse enigma. Walt's return to save Jesse at the end of Breaking Bad proves he did care about him all along. Jesse's freedom wouldn't have happened without Walt's intervention. Walt and Jesse in Breaking Bad. While Walt and Jesse begin Breaking Bad as part of an uneasy alliance, they eventually settle into what appears to be a relatively wholesome father-son dynamic, meth empire notwithstanding. That said, there are countless occasions where it seems as though the affection between them is incredibly one-sided. Jesse pretty much always seems to look up to his former chemistry teacher. While he initially feels strong-armed into working with Walt, Aaron Paul's character quickly comes to respect his new partner's immense talent and drive. Signs like Jesse's genuine concern for Walt's ongoing health problems and even buying him a watch for his birthday prove they weren't just colleagues. On the other hand, there are countless things that Walt says and does that make it seem like he sees Jesse as little more than someone to be manipulated, a means to an end that he can use to get what he wants. Then, there are occasions where Walt's loyalty to Jesse is portrayed as something approaching concrete. In Felina, Walt's plan to rescue Jesse from indentured service to Jack, Michael Bowen, and his men is carried out, at least in part, due to the motivation to save Aaron Paul's character. If Walt truly didn't care about what happened to Jesse, he'd have been incredibly unlikely to help him in the way that he did. A key detail reinforces the fact Walt wasn't just looking to avenge Hank. The death of Walt's brother-in-law wasn't the only motivation for Cranston's Breaking Bad character. Dean Norris as Hank in Breaking Bad. It's important to remember that Jack's men executed Hank, Dean Norris, and Walt was often insistent that his DEA brother-in-law should never come into the line of fire. So, freeing Jesse wasn't Walt's only motive for gunning down Jack and his goons, he also wanted revenge for Hank's death. However, when Walt is first taken inside during the scene that eventually sees his plan come to fruition, everyone who dies later on is already there. Jesse is the only absentee. If Walt had only been there to avenge his late brother-in-law, he would have had no issue making a grab for his car keys and gun remote before his imprisoned colleague arrived. Having already lost everything at this point, paired with the return of his cancer, I don't think Walt much cared about leaving the scene alive. So, I'm convinced the reason he held off on executing the final stage of his plan was because he wanted to make sure Jesse was alright. Plus, by diving on him, Walt was ensuring Jesse wouldn't catch a stray bullet. Jesse's refusal to shoot Walt proves he also still cares for his former partner. Aaron Paul's character couldn't pull the trigger. Aaron Paul as Jesse Pinkman in Breaking Bad. Shortly before Felina, Jesse almost leaves Albuquerque to start a new life, but stays when he has the revelation that Walt was the one who poisoned Brock, Ian Posada. Combined with other instances where Jesse would have invariably been felt mistreated by Walt, it would have been completely understandable for this to be a major tipping point. I don't think anyone would blame Jesse for hating Walt's guts by the time of Felina. The Breaking Bad writers brilliantly wrote Cranston's character to be increasingly unlikable throughout the show, and that hatred has finally reached saturation point for Jesse in the Season 5 finale. Still, despite the opportunity for Jesse to shoot Walt dead after being freed, Aaron Paul's character shockingly can't bring himself to end the life of the man who sucked him into the darkest era of his life so far. Having just choked Todd, Jesse Plemons, to death, there's no question Jesse was physically capable of shooting Walt, if he'd wanted to. The fact that Jesse couldn't bring himself to do it suggests that, deep down, Jesse still had some degree of love and respect for Walt after all they'd been through together. It also reinforces Jesse's image as the better man between the two of them, as Aaron Paul's character realizes the violence and betrayals must end. Why Breaking Bad waited so long to answer this question? Walt and Jesse's dynamic needed to be vague for their story to work. Breaking Bad is never short of tension. It's what the show doesn't show or refuses to directly explain that massively contributes to the story's feeling of unease. So, while Walt and Jesse's unclear dynamic isn't the only way Breaking Bad creates this level of tension, it is one of the most effective methods of doing so.